It was a bright morning in Lagos, but inside the hospital room, the air felt heavy, thick with pain, hope, and silence. Obinna lay on the bed, his skin pale and his body thin. His chest moved up and down slowly, like every breath hurt. An oxygen mask covered his nose. Tubes ran from his arms to a machine beside him. The hospital bedsheet barely covered his legs. His hand, bony and shaking, reached toward the woman he had loved with all his life. "Adana, please," he said. His voice cracked like broken glass. His eyes were wet. Tears streamed down his face as he watched her pack her suitcase. Adana didn't answer. She stood by the door of the private hospital room in a long, green, expensive gown that hugged her body like a second skin. Her hair was neatly packed in a bun, and her nails were polished. She looked like royalty in the middle of a battlefield. Little Nadia, just 5 years old, ran to her mother and hugged her leg tightly. "Mummy, don't go," she whispered. Still, Adana said nothing. Obinna tried again, his voice weaker. How did it go? That meeting?" Adana turned slowly, her eyes cold and dry. "How did it go?" she repeated. "It went well, Obinna." "Very well. Do you want to know why?" Obinna blinked slowly. He nodded, his lips trembling under the oxygen mask. Adana took a deep breath and stepped forward, then knelt beside the bed. "For 5 years," she began, her voice sharp but calm. "I gave you everything I had. I gave you my youth. I gave you my dreams. I carried your child. I cleaned your wounds. I held your hands. Even when I wanted to go back to school, I stayed." Obinna's hand trembled, still reaching for her. Adana didn't hold it. "But guess what?" she continued. "All that time, I was living in poverty. I was married to a man who could barely feed his family, a taxi driver with no future." Obinna closed his eyes. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Adana stood. Her voice rose. "Today, I found out that billionaire Chief George Donald is my real father. Me. I am the only heir to his empire. I now have a new life, a new name, a new identity. Why should I stay in this small, dying life when I now have the whole world waiting for me?" Nadia sobbed loudly. "Mummy, please don't leave Daddy." Adana pulled her leg from the child's grip. "Obinna," she said, her eyes narrowing, "if you want to die, go ahead. If you survive, raise your daughter. I am no longer part of this chapter." She turned and walked out of the room. Obinna cried harder. He stretched his hand one last time, calling her name. "Adana, Adana, please, don't." But she didn't look back, not even once. 3 months earlier. Before everything changed, Adana was the girl who smiled through pain. She had grown up in Iyana Ipaja after losing both parents in a car crash when she was just 14. After secondary school, her dream was to become a lawyer, but there was no one to help. No aunt, no uncle, no friend, nobody. She worked small jobs cleaning, selling pure water, anything to survive. At 20, she met Obinna. He was 10 years older, driving a rickety taxi in Lagos traffic, always covered in sweat, but always smiling. He treated her like a queen. They fell in love fast. He made her laugh, bought her roasted corn by the roadside, and sang to her when she was sad. He didn't have money, but he had kindness. They got married in a small court wedding with plastic chairs and warm Coca-Cola. Soon, Nadia was born. They were poor but happy. That was before the sickness started. Obinna came home one evening, holding his stomach. At first, he said it was ulcer. Then it became worse. He vomited. He lost weight. His skin turned pale. The doctor's voice was cold when he said it. "Kidney failure. One kidney is already gone. The other is failing." They needed 20 million naira for a transplant. 20 million. Obinna looked at Adana, then at their little girl. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have done more." Adana cried every night beside his hospital bed. Sometimes she screamed into the pillow so her daughter wouldn't hear, but Nadia always heard. One night, she crawled into the hospital bed, held her father's weak hand, and said, "Daddy, please don't die." Then came the call. That morning changed everything. Adana sat by Obina's side, wiping his forehead, when her phone rang. "Hello, are you Miss Adana Williams?" a deep male voice asked. "Yes," she replied. "My name is Richard. I work for Chief George Donald, the billionaire. He wants to meet you. He believes you're his daughter. Please come to his mansion in Victoria Island. I'll send the address." Adana froze. Even Obina noticed. Who was that? She stared at her phone. "They said, a billionaire. Said he's my father." Obina chuckled weakly. "Maybe this is our miracle." He smiled through the oxygen mask. He didn't know that those would be the last words he would say to her as his wife. Adana arrived at the mansion like someone in a dream. Gold gates, marble floor, guards who bowed, maids who offered her wine. Then she met him, Chief George Donald, grey-haired, strong, and silent. He looked at her for a long time before he spoke. "I knew it," he said. "You look just like Amanda, your mother." Her knees buckled. They spoke for hours. He explained everything. His past, her mother, the hospital records, his regrets. "I lost my daughters in a crash. I can't lose another child. You are my heir, Adana, and everything I have belongs to you now." She sat there, stunned. She whispered, "Is this real?" The DNA test was done that day. 2 days later, the result came. It was true. Adana was his biological daughter. The next morning, she woke up in a room bigger than the house she once rented. The maids brought her a green gown. A private driver waited outside beside a Bentley. She was going to pick her bag from the hospital. She was not going to say goodbye, only to walk away forever. The Bentley purred to a stop outside the private hospital. The driver stepped out and opened the door, but Adana didn't move immediately. She sat still in the back seat, fingers running over the expensive clutch bag on her lap. Her green gown shimmered under the morning sun. Her makeup was perfect, her nails painted fresh. But her heart? Her heart was beating like thunder. She was no longer the same girl who cried every night beside her dying husband. She wasn't the helpless mother who begged for donations outside the hospital gate. She was now the daughter of a billionaire. She was now power. She was now wealth. She stepped out, head high. Inside the hospital room, Obina turned his head slowly as the door creaked open. Nadia sat beside him, drawing stick figures on a notepad. The moment she saw her mother, she lit up. "Mummy!" she shouted, running over to hug her. But Adana didn't bend down to receive the hug. She gently stepped aside. "I came to get my bag," she said coldly. Obina's eyes softened. "How did it go?" She didn't look at him. She walked to the corner and picked up her small travel bag. "It went well." There was a pause. Obina cleared his throat. "Adana, is there hope?" She turned to him slowly. Her face was unreadable. "Hope?" she said. And then she laughed. But it was cold. "Hope is when a billionaire tells you he's your father. Hope is when he changes his will and gives you an empire. Hope is waking up in silk sheets, not hospital ones soaked with sweat." Obina blinked. What are you saying?" Adana stepped closer. "I'm saying I'm done." Nadia's smile faded. "Mummy?" Adana's voice cracked, but she fought to hold it steady. "I have suffered enough. I have struggled enough. Obina, I gave you my life. I gave you all I had, and you gave me nothing but a sickbed and poverty. You call this marriage?" Obina's lips quivered. "But we loved each other." She cut him off. "Love doesn't pay hospital bills. Love doesn't buy school shoes. Love doesn't feed a child." Obina's eyes filled with tears. "You're leaving us?" Adana nodded slowly. "You and Nadia are my past." Nadia burst into tears. She clung to her father. "Mummy, no." Obina tried to rise from the bed, but his body failed him. "Please, don't go." Adana's hand trembled as she touched the doorknob. "I hope you survive," she said. "But even if you don't, that's not my concern anymore." And just like that, she walked out. The new life. Back at the mansion, everything changed fast. Chief George Donald called a press conference and introduced Adana to the world as his daughter. The headlines spread like wildfire. Billionaire's secret daughter discovered. Heiress to Donald Empire revealed. Adana George Donald takes over legacy. She was given a suite with 3 bedrooms, a personal chef, her own stylist, and an assistant who followed her everywhere with a clipboard. Her social media exploded. People she never met before began calling her Princess Adana. But beneath the glamour, one truth remained. She never told Chief George that she had a husband or a daughter. Not once. Whenever he asked about her past, she waved it off. It was all pain, she'd say. Nothing worth talking about. George believed her. He was so excited to have someone to pass on the empire to, he didn't push. His 2 daughters had died the previous year in a plane crash on their way back from school abroad. Their deaths broke him. Adana's arrival felt like healing. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Obinna grew weaker by the day. Bills piled up. The nurses grew tired of waiting for payment. Nadia sat beside him every day, refusing to leave. Sometimes, she offered the doctors her piggy bank and school bag, asking if it was enough to make her daddy better. One day, the head nurse came in with sad eyes. "Sir," she whispered, "we have to move you to the general ward. You've overstayed without payment." Obinna nodded slowly. He was too tired to protest. That night, he closed his eyes and whispered to God, "If this is how I'm going to die, please, don't let my daughter suffer." But something happened. A miracle in the news. One morning, the hospital erupted in noise. Security guards, reporters, and nurses all rushed to the front gate. The governor of the state had arrived, quietly and without warning. He was touring hospitals to see the condition of healthcare firsthand. When he entered Obinna's ward, he paused. "This man looks like he's been suffering for a long time," he said. The doctor explained everything: the kidney failure, the transplant cost, the unpaid bills. The governor nodded. "Put him on the transplant list immediately. My office will cover the bills." Everyone gasped. Obinna didn't understand at first, but when it finally sank in, he broke down in tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Weeks passed. The surgery was successful. Obinna recovered faster than the doctors expected. His skin color returned. His strength came back. He could finally walk without help. The drivers' union raised money to support him until he could get back on his feet. And Nadia? She returned to school smart, quiet, and kind. Her teachers loved her. She never talked about her mother. She only talked about her father. "He's my hero," she'd say. Obinna started selling fairly used cars after borrowing money from a friend. Slowly, he built a name for himself. Years passed. Nadia grew into a beautiful young woman, brilliant, focused, humble. She studied software engineering and graduated top of her class. Her final project went viral online, and before she even turned 22, she got an offer from an international tech company. They gave her a car, an apartment, and a signing bonus that would make anyone cry. The first thing she did? She bought a mansion and gave it to her father. "Daddy," she said, handing him the keys, "you never gave up on me. This is for you." But life doesn't forget. And for Adana, the past was about to knock. Literally, one early morning, just before sunrise, a knock came on the mansion gate. Obinna was in the living room sipping tea. Nadia, now on off-duty from her job, was helping him arrange his medicine cabinet. The knock came again harder. "Daddy, are you expecting anyone?" Nadia asked. He shook his head. "No." Nadia walked to the door, opened it halfway, and froze. Her heart stopped. There, kneeling in rags, was her mother, Adana. Her face was sunken, her eyes bloodshot, her wig was crooked, her clothes were torn. Behind her stood another woman, Monica, her friend. Adana cried, "Nadia, please, forgive me." Nadia stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, she shut the door. The air outside the mansion was thick with silence. Adana knelt on the dusty porch, her knees bruised against the hard tiles, tears running down her face. Her hands trembled as she reached out and knocked again. Nadia, she whispered, voice weak. Please, it's me. I'm your mother. But the door stayed shut. Monica, the friend who had been sheltering her in a one-room apartment in the outskirts of Lagos, stood behind her. She had never seen Adana this broken. Maybe this was a mistake, Monica whispered, tugging at her sleeve. We can try another day. No, Adana cried. No, Monica. This is my child, my baby girl. She sobbed harder. I left her, and I have to make it right. Inside the mansion, Nadia sat back down on the couch. Her face was blank, unreadable. Obinna looked at her gently. That was your mother, wasn't it? Nadia nodded. She's changed, she said softly. She looks older than her age. She looked like someone who lost everything. Obinna sighed, sipping his tea again. People who chase fantasy often forget that the real treasures are the ones they leave behind. Nadia looked at her father, her eyes glistening. Should we open the door? Obinna didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, then said, Let her knock again. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. Adana looked up. Obinna stood there. He looked different, now healthy, confident, even handsome, in a clean white kaftan. His beard was well trimmed, and he wore a pair of brown sandals. Beside him stood Nadia, tall, elegant in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, her arms crossed. Adana's lips trembled. Obinna. Nadia. She lowered her head, ashamed to even look them in the eyes. I'm sorry, she said. Please, just listen. They said nothing. I lost everything, she began. After George Donald died, I took over the company. I thought I could handle it, but I was foolish. I trusted the wrong people. She glanced at Monica, who stood quietly behind her. I met a foreign agent who promised to manage the company better than I could. I gave him access to everything. The documents, the passwords, the accounts. Her voice broke. He sold everything. He emptied the accounts. He vanished. Nadia's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. But it was too late. The documents he used were legally binding. I signed without reading. He cleaned me out. I was too busy buying new things, showing off my new life. I didn't even go back to school. Adana looked up, her face full of regret. I lived for the money, and now I have none. She broke down. I've been living with Monica in a room that smells like gutter. I've been drinking Gary and sleeping on the floor. No driver, no chef, no name, just silence. Obinna said nothing. He turned and walked back inside. Nadia didn't move. Adana crawled forward on her knees. Nadia, I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for not choosing you. She gripped her daughter's leg. I don't expect you to call me Mum. I don't even deserve to be in your life. But please, forgive me. Monica knelt too. Please, Nadia. She's been through enough. She talks about you every night. She cries in her sleep. Please. Nadia stood there quietly, and then, with a voice calm but firm, she said, I forgive you. Adana looked up quickly, hopeful, but Nadia continued, But I can't be your daughter. You left me when I needed you most. You told my father to die and walked away. That's not what mothers do. Tears ran down her cheeks. I forgive you, but I'll never forget. She walked inside. Later that night, Obinna asked them to come in. Adana and Monica sat on the edge of the couch, awkward and silent. Monica looked at the chandelier and marveled. Obinna served them food rice and stew with fried plantains. Adana stared at the plate and whispered, You're feeding me? After everything I did? Obinna smiled gently. That's who I am, Adana. You walked away. But I'm not built to carry hate. I forgave you years ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. Adana wiped her eyes and nodded. I understand. I will give you something to help you get back on your feet, Obinna continued. But that's all, no more. Nadia came out with a brown envelope and handed it to her. There's 2 million naira in there, she said flatly. You can start a business, rent a place, build a life again. Adana's lips trembled. Thank you, But don't come back, Nadia added. Please. I need peace. In the months that followed, Adana opened a small fabric store in Aja. Monica helped her manage it. It wasn't a big business, but she could eat, sleep, and live with dignity. Every now and then, she passed by her old life on TV stories about Nadia's new app, pictures of Abina at charity events. She never called, she never knocked again, and she never stopped crying when she looked in the mirror. Another beginning. 1 year later, it was a bright Saturday morning. The sun shone brightly over the flower-decorated church hall. Guests filled the chairs. There were no gold-plated thrones or grand stages, just a soft white aisle and soft piano music playing in the background. Nadia stood in a simple white gown, holding a bouquet. Her eyes sparkled as she looked ahead. Beside her stood Benjamin, her groom, and walking her down the aisle was Abina. He smiled proudly as he gave her hand to Benjamin. Nadia whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." Tears filled his eyes. "You gave me everything I lost." In the crowd, far behind the last row of chairs, stood a woman in a faded blue dress and brown scarf. She didn't make a sound. She didn't try to be seen. She only watched. Adana wept silently. Her daughter was happy. Her husband was at peace. And her own heart? It was learning the meaning of true loss. The wedding reception was modest but filled with joy. Children danced barefoot on the grass. Laughter echoed under the canopy. The smell of jollof rice, fried chicken, and soft drinks filled the air. There were no celebrities, no politicians, no fancy photographers, just family, close friends, and sincere happiness. Abina wore a clean white agbada. He didn't stop smiling the whole day. Nadia was radiant in her simple lace gown, her natural hair in a bun, her arm tucked tightly in Benjamin's. They whispered and giggled like old friends. Their love was easy, gentle. And Adana? She stood by a mango tree across the field, holding a small handkerchief. She hadn't been invited. She knew she wasn't welcome, but she came anyway. She needed to see her daughter one last Timano as an heiress, not as a stranger but as the baby she once rocked to sleep in a tiny room in Mushin, the same baby she once carried on her back while selling tomatoes in the sun. She didn't wipe her tears. She let them roll freely. Then she heard her name. Adana? She turned. It was Monica, rushing toward her in a brown and cream Ankara gown. "I told you not to come," Monica whispered, pulling her aside. "You said you wouldn't." "I know," Adana said. "I just wanted to see her happy." Monica looked at her carefully. "You think this will bring you peace?" Adana smiled faintly. "No, but it helps me believe she turned out right, despite me." Then the music changed. Nadia and Benjamin took the stage for their first dance. As they swayed to the soft tune, everyone clapped. Phones flashed. Friends cheered. And from the shadow of the tree, Adana whispered, "That used to be my little girl." Weeks later, Nadia was clearing out her email inbox when she saw it. Subject: From someone who once called herself your mother. She stared at it for a long time before finally clicking it. "Dear Nadia, I know you may never read this, or maybe you will and delete it before reaching the end. I understand, I really do. I don't write this letter to defend myself. There's no defense for what I did. I abandoned you. I walked away when you both needed me. I chose comfort over love. I chose wealth over family. And I lost both. The day I left that hospital, I thought I was walking into a better life. But what I didn't know was that I was walking away from the only people who ever truly loved me. Your father is a better person than I ever was. And you are everything I prayed you'd be, even when I didn't deserve to pray for you. You don't have to write me back. You don't even have to forgive me again. I only wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. Love, Adana." Nadia sat there for a while. Then, slowly, she closed the laptop. She didn't reply. But she didn't delete the email either. The life she built without her name. Adana's small fabric shop in Aja slowly began to grow. With Monica's help and the 2 million naira Abina had given her, she stocked Ankara, lace, and ready-made wrappers. Women from the neighborhood began calling her Mama Lace. Every time someone asked about her family, she smiled and said, "I have no one. But God, the mansion that once belonged to her, the company cars, the expensive heels, the spa days, and press attention gone. Sometimes she saw headlines about Donald's group of companies. The firm was bought by an international brand. Her name was no longer on any document. No one even remembered she was once an heiress. She had no will to sue or fight, not anymore. The new Adana just wanted to be at peace. Nadia's new chapter. Nadia settled into her marriage with Benjamin like puzzle pieces clicking together. They moved into a modest duplex in Lekki. Her tech career grew. She launched a startup that trained low-income girls on how to code. She called it Code Her. Abina proudly showed off every feature about her on TV. "That's my daughter," he would tell taxi drivers. She came from nothing. Nadia would smile, but deep inside, one truth still lived in her heart like an old scar. The woman who gave her life chose to walk away from it. And that truth, no matter how much she tried to bury it, still hurt. Then came the twist. One cool morning, Benjamin opened the mailbox and handed Nadia a letter in a brown envelope. It had no name, no return address. Just one line at the back. Urgent. Property in your name. Nadia frowned and opened it. Inside was a folded document and a short handwritten note. "Dear Nadia, I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to know that I left something behind when I left that mansion. Something no one ever claimed, because no one ever knew. Before the company was stolen, I bought a small plot of land in Badagry. I used my name, but I registered it with yours too. You were 5 then. I called it Nadia's place. I had hoped to build a quiet home there for us one day. I never did, but it's yours. The documents are enclosed. Do what you want with it, or nothing at all. Either way, I'll never stop praying for you. Adana." Nadia stood frozen, staring at the papers. Benjamin read her face. "What's wrong?" She handed him the note, then looked out the window, her voice barely a whisper. "She still remembers me." That evening, Nadia drove alone to the address listed in the letter. When she reached the land in Badagry, she stepped out of the car and looked around. The plot was empty, except for one small thing in the middle. A wooden bench, old, worn, painted in fading white letters, "Nadia's place." She walked over to it, sat down, and cried, because sometimes it takes losing everything to finally give something real. Nadia sat alone on the bench under the fading evening sun, her fingers tracing the chipped paint that read, "Nadia's place." She had come here to find closure, to understand if this land was a forgotten promise or a desperate apology. Instead, she found something she didn't expect: peace. A gentle breeze swept across the quiet Badagry plot. Birds flew overhead. Far in the distance, she could hear children laughing. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she imagined her mother not as the woman who walked away, but as the young, scared girl who had once carried her on her back, barefoot, through muddy markets. She remembered the soft lullabies, the birthday card written in pencil, the plantain pancakes on Sunday mornings. She exhaled deeply. Maybe that version of her mother still existed, buried under guilt and time. 2 weeks later, Obinna was in the backyard watering the garden when he heard the knock. It was slow, uncertain, like someone unsure if they were welcome. He opened the door, and there she was, Adana. She looked cleaner now, her hair in a scarf, her blouse tucked neatly into a wrapper. Her eyes were sunken, but she smiled gently. "I didn't come to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you for raising our daughter, for keeping her safe, for being the better parent." Abina studied her face for a long moment. "She forgave you, you know." Adana blinked quickly, tears forming. "I know. That's what hurts the most. That I never deserved it." They stood in silence. Then he asked, "Have you eaten?" She looked up, surprised. "What?" "I'm asking if you've eaten." She smiled, a soft and tired smile. "No, not today." He stepped aside. "Come in." She paused, then stepped in slowly. At the dinner table, Nadia and Benjamin were visiting, and when they saw her sitting at the table, there was a long silence. Benjamin gently touched Nadia's hand under the table. "You okay?" he whispered. Nadia nodded, then turned to Adana. "You wrote to me." Adana's voice trembled. "Yes. I wasn't expecting a reply. I just needed to say something real." For once, Nadia reached into her bag and brought out a folded photo. It was old-worn at the corners. It was of her, as a baby, wrapped in Adana's arms on a park bench. "This was taken at Agage Park. You were smiling. I didn't know joy could live in a photo like this." Adana stared at it, tears welling. "I remember that day. You wouldn't stop laughing when the ice cream melted on your nose." Abina smiled faintly. "She still loves ice cream." Nadia folded the photo again and placed it on the table. "You can keep it." Adana blinked. "Really? I want to remember the version of you that loved me," Nadia said softly. "Even if she got lost for a while." Closure, not reconnection. After dinner, as Benjamin and Nadia prepared to leave, Adana walked them to the door. "Thank you for listening," she said quietly. "I don't expect anything more." Nadia nodded. "And I don't owe you anything." Adana smiled sadly. "I know, but," Nadia continued, "maybe one day, if my son asks about his grandmother, I'll tell him the full story." Adana swallowed hard. "Even the bad parts?" "Yes," Nadia said, "because even mistakes deserve to be remembered so. Others don't repeat them." She stepped into the car with Benjamin and drove off into the night. A new purpose. Months passed. Adana didn't try to call or visit again, but she went back to the land in Badagry Nadia's place and built a small center for young mothers. She called it the Second Chance Foundation. She used the little she had to teach market women how to sew, to read, to start over. She told her story at every workshop. "I was a mother who left, but I found a way to give back even if it's not to the ones I lost." And with time, people came. Volunteers joined. Donations trickled in. Women found hope, and so did she. One late afternoon, Nadia drove past the foundation with her son in the back seat. She stopped quietly outside, watching through the gate. She saw her mother helping a woman carry a sleeping child, wrapping her with a small pink blanket. Adana laughed gently, rocking the baby in her arms. And for a brief moment, Nadia smiled, because sometimes the people who break us still have pieces of love left to give. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.